All right, great. Well, hello everyone. My name is Jaydin Conner. Like Mr. Martin said, I am currently a junior at North Carolina State University, majoring in environmental assessment. And I also want to say a special thanks to Brianna Martin, my mentor, and one of my big supporters throughout this project. So thanks to her that I was really able to get going on this, get her advice on this, and she was really there for me every semester, which I greatly appreciate. So thank you very much. And this past year, through the graciousness of Otter Creation Alliance, I had the amazing opportunity to study microplastics and their effects on the environment, specifically nurdle pollution. And now, the most important question that I usually get, which is, what is a nurdle? Well, nurdles are microplastic pellets used in manufacturing to create plastic materials. They're essentially the raw building blocks that we use every day to create plastic items, such as grocery bags, plastic cups, forks, plasticware, and other polyethylene or polystyrene materials. They're about the size of a lentil, and they come in a variety of colors, although they're most commonly clear or white. And it can take a lot of nurdles to create one item, usually about 600 nurdles for one small water bottle. So they're often transported in bulk. So this is a map of the nurdles found in the U.S. Citizen Science Project called Nurdle Patrol. It's, of course, a citizen science project used to report nurdle discoveries using their methods. As you can see, they're commonly found across the country, including the world, as they're used to make all of our items. And when they can often escape into our environment through spills, especially during transportation, which is very important because they're often shipped across the world. Nurdle research gained a lot of attention here in the United States after a few major spills off the Gulf Coast of Texas, where the Nurdle Patrol Citizen Science Project was initially held. However, there's not been a lot of attention here up north, especially here in Maryland, which is a bit sad, but I'm putting to fast. So why are nurdles important? When a nurdle spill happens, it is almost impossible to remove them from the environment once they enter it. Their small size lets them float away on the waves, and once they spill onto land, most sewage systems cannot filter them out. So when they when they enter the environment, they can act as passive samplers, meaning that they can absorb toxic chemicals. Studies also show that nurdles can also collect and harbor bacteria on top of their surfaces, such as E. coli and species of Vibrio. This is also important because when wildlife consumes nurdles, as they kind of resemble fish eggs, as you can kind of see in this photo, they can enter the food chain. And when those toxins bioaccumulate in an animal, they can be packed up the food chain and eventually enter the food that we eat, which can pose a serious safety risk for human consumers. Now, the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed are very important ecological factors that foster a diversity of life within its bay and other areas. It's important that we raise awareness about nurdle pollution because we are the last line of defense and we are the protectors of our ecosystem. And I believe that it's important that we protect survival of the countless species that our ecosystem inhabits and displaces and grows. So to combat nurdle pollution in Maryland, I had to make a few changes to my project. Current research is primarily designed for long sandy beaches, and Maryland's ecosystem and shorelines, coastal and local, are widely varied. So, for example, my research led me to short, muddy, and pebbly shorelines with lots of vegetation. So to make surveying possible to begin with, I had to make a few changes to my set criteria. So I scouted several sites during low tide to determine the criteria that a site needs to meet to be an eligible candidate for survey. This criteria included accessible shorelines ranging from a sandy to pebbly composition with at least one rack line leading towards vegetation. I found 4 sites within the Otter Creek tributary that met this criteria. There was of course, the boat launch ramp here at the site, right there, and down that way, which is probably flooding right now. There's a shoreline across from the estuary over there, which is pretty inaccessible unless you go by boat. There's the opening spots at the river called Flying Point Park, and there's also a site further up this river behind some apartments. I also used 2 tested sites, one in Delaware and one in Maryland. Sorry, close to Maryland, and one in Baltimore to test the integrity of my methods later on. Here's a visual of any sea life estuary sites, along with a few terms to help explain the nature of the shoreline, because this can be complicated. So a few terms to know is the waterline, which of course is self-explanatory, but it's the current level of the water, which can change. There's also the rack line, or also called the debris line, which you can see right here in purple, but you didn't see, but there's something there. And this is where areas of debris can be deposited during or after high tide, so tide like that. There's also the vegetation line, which is the barrier of stable natural vegetation at the top of the water, often formed by roots, other weeds, or just general plants. And now we get to the fun part. So, for my initial methods, I got them from the Nurdle Patrol Citizen Science Project, and that consists of a strictly visual analysis of a rack line for 10 minutes. And we also start at the closest rack line to the water. So that's the rack line immediately to the water. You would then set a 10-minute timer and begin your search along that rack line. If no nurdles were found, you would move to the next rack line and repeat that 10-minute timer process over and over and over again until the vegetation line is reached, at which point your survey was complete. However, if you did at any point find the nurdles during your entire search, you would stay on that rack line, restart your 10-minute timer, and continue surveying for that 10 minutes. And once those 10 minutes were up, any nurdles that completed, any nurdles that you found were documented and sealed in a Ziploc bag, and the survey was complete. And now I also had my revised message, which came along a bit later in my project, where I designed the methods to target the furthest distinct rack line, that is the rack line furthest from the water, the most inland on the shore. You would once again set your 10-minute timer and begin your search. And again, if no nurdles were found, at this point you would search toward the flood line, so further in, often past vegetation. You then restart your 10-minute search, look on the rack line, found no nurdles, repeat the process over and over again until you have surveyed the flood line, which is pre-established during that survey. Once that flood line is reached, often back towards vegetation, the survey is complete. If you found any nurdles during that survey, you would stay on the rack line or the debris line that you have found. Continue your survey for 10 minutes. Once the timer is up, your survey is complete. And here is just a quick visual of what part of the floodline might look like. This is taken at the ACL site right here, the Mesa Estuary Center. As you can see, it's nearly composed of wood chips, loose sturds, a few weedy vegetations, some larger vegetation with the root. And as you can see, gloves were worn due to the threat of nurdles can pose. So, big question, why the change from the initial methods to the revised methods? Well, fun stuff. Using the initial methods, my surveys went on for weeks. I think about almost 2 months with no nurdle discoveries, which is a big issue because these were the initial methods published by the Nurdle Patrol Citizen Science Project, which were finding nurdles down in Texas. So why wasn't I finding any here? Well, to test the integrity of these methods, I eventually went to the site in Delaware where there were higher reported quantities of nurdles. And still, I found nothing. So, what's the deal? It was only when I strayed further from the initial methods, out of that boundaries, and I checked further up the site, past the vegetation line, that I find a massive debris line full of nurdles. And to me, that confirmed that I need to change something about my project to really succeed. So I developed a new methods, or revised methods, where I targeted the furthest debris line. And once I employed those methods here at the ACL site, I immediately found nurdles. So clearly something had changed. And I did, succeeded. So I sampled a few graphs to understand what was discovered using the methods and where. This graph particularly, this represents the total quantity of nurdles collected from all of my sites using both of my methods. These sites were the NBC Light site, the Flying Point Park site, the shoreline of Crossing Estuary, the site in the Upper Bruce River and the apartments, the Baltimore testing site, and the Delaware testing site. As you can see, the initial method had 0 nurdles collected for all sites. The revised methods had 13 nurdles collected at the NBC Light site and several more, especially at Delaware, using the revised methods. So I was also, and just to make things clear, I was collecting any other non-nurdle microplastics. You might know these as pieces of plastic, little tiny chips of plastic that are often colored, like sandboxes or literally anything. This will include strains of plastic, fibers, and beads of plastic. And so this graph demonstrates the number of non-nurdles collected at each site using my initial and revised methods. It's quite a lot there. Comparison for guys. And here, I focus on all microplastic pieces, nurdle and non-nurdle, that were collected specifically at the NBC Light site using both of my methods. The initial methods had 13 microplastic pieces found, but zero nurdles, and the revised methods had 13 nurdles found, but 7 microplastic pieces collected. So we had a mix of both using the revised. I also want to include a small visual representation of what was collected specifically at the NBC Light Estuary site using both methods. And again, this is just a sample of not all of what was collected. On the left, we have a sample of what was collected using the initial methods, right there, consisting of different types of microplastics, but no nurdles. That is not a nurdle. It's just a weird shape of plastic. We have there styrofoam, those little chips of plastic, beads of plastic, but no nurdles. And on the right, we have a sample of collected using the revised methods, such as nurdles and microplastics, which I've separated into 2 different groups, so you can see the difference. This is a version of this. These are microplastics. Although they can look the same, it's really important to differentiate them because although all microplastic pollution is still pollution, nurdles in particular are what we are focusing on this study. So what does this all mean? Why did I collect all this data? Well, the data shows that the revised methods are better for finding nurdles, while the initial methods are just better for finding microplastics, other non-nurdle debris. And so this data highlights that nurdles are also primarily concentrated within or beyond the vegetation line, which was a big deal at the time because none of the literature that I reviewed prior to this project mentioned that anyway. It was always along the same shoreline, always close to the water, and yet I never found any nurdles anywhere in that description. So this is a very big deal for me because it kind of almost revolutionizes how we're going to look for nurdles along Maryland coastlines. And nurdle pollution in Maryland can often be attributed to local shipping routes that pass through the area to larger cities, as exemplified by the CSX train that runs right past the estuary. That blue line is the CSX train taken from the road. Other factors can also include the several pre-existing plastic production facilities along the local rivers near the ACL sites. I do believe there are some further up this river that could explain how these mills got all the way down. Other project ideas that I had for the future were to continue to tweak and improve the revised methods for more difficult results. As I explained earlier, it took me about 2 months into my project for me to actually get to these revised methods. So more data is always the best thing. And another idea is to determine the distribution of nurdles across Maryland. Both of these could be used for new citizen science projects, focusing on the revised methods that could be used by anyone, children, adults, again, all data is welcome data. For future directions, it's important to raise awareness about nurdle pollution and advocate for better regulation on both the state and local level. I'd also like to mention the Plastic Pellet-Free Waters Act, which was introduced into legislation in July 2023. This act calls for the EPA to prohibit the discharge of pre-production plastics like nurdles from entering our waterways and to assure accountability when a spill occurs. This was the one in September 2023, right after I finished my project, When a CSX train derailed north of DC near the Anacostia River. This resulted in an unknown quantity of nurdles spilling into the local environment, and it took over 2 weeks before any precautionary measures were installed in the attempt to contain them. Spills like this have a very significant impact on both the health of the ecosystem and the people who live within it. This is why it's important to continue devoting research to the study of nurdles and how they impact Maryland. Because even if you're not looking for them, they are still there. It's clear that conducting small-scale surveys for nurdles in Otter Point Creek is manageable for an individual. However, to extend our research across Maryland, more awareness is needed. And although the Chesapeake Bay hasn't received the same level of attention as the Gulf Coast of Texas when it comes to nurdle pollution, we must take the first steps to preserve our environment, protect our wildlife, and ensure the safety of public health. Thank you. Any questions?
So how do you tell the difference between a nurdle and microplastic? Especially you mentioned some of them are more round, so how can you tell the difference?
That is a great question. Although there isn't a lot of current data that exemplifies the distinct difference, I've discovered a few methods of just when you're out in the field telling them apart. Generally, if you look at the nurdle, I wish I had smaller. I've looked at again, data, but when you look at a nurdle, you'll also see a small bubble of air inside of it because it's a pre-production plastic, unlike a bead, which is generally a post-production plastic. And because they're just melt down, for whatever process they have, there's a small amount of air in them. And so they also float a lot better than those beads, which tend to be more dense. And nurdles often have the same elliptical shape, whereas beads often get very degraded from where nurdles do not. They tend to maintain that shape, which is very small and circular.
Okay.
Well, I'm thinking about your two different methodologies. So in the Gulf Coast, the nurdles were found closer to the water, and here the nurdles were found, closer to the land, interface, and water interface. I'm wondering if it's in the Gulf Coast, the spills are happening in the water, and the water's bringing them ashore. Here, you're taking the source to the train line, so the source is the land, and that's kind of what I was thinking when you. That might be why you have different methodologies showing the nurdles in two different ways. What are your thoughts on that?
Very happy you asked that question because there are about 3 conversations. When a spill happens on land, there are a lot of reports that the nurdles, for example, in September 2023 spill, where the CSX train spilled onto land, that these nurdles washed up very far downriver. They immediately entered the environment. So it's again 2 weeks, so the rain really just carried them, and they really do move when they get pushed by something. They're very small, they're very lightweight, and so they can travel very, very far. What generally happens is once a spill happens on land, if it isn't immediately contained, if the accountability isn't taken for them, they will get into the water one way or another. Whether this is washing down the street into the sewage, escaping, because sewage systems just don't have any protections on them to contain them, they will eventually end up back in our ecosystem. And that's generally when they get into the water and they wash back up on shore. And I think one of the primary reasons that, especially here at the estuary sites, that they were found so far back on the shoreline, because we're probably not dumping nurdles anywhere near here, I would hope. I think that we would at least have some record of that, especially because I found a high quantity here compared to the other sites which have none, is that the site here at the estuary has a very smaller shoreline compared to many others that I looked at. And as a result, when high tide comes or the flood happens due to rainwater we can see outside, the water level rises. And here, especially that I've noted during high tide, the water level rises up to the trees. It gets very pushed back far into the vegetation. This might explain why I found them so far back in vegetation, because they're do float and they will rise water. And also because the steep slope line here at the estuary, I'm not sure if anyone's actually seen it here, but it does get pretty steep once vegetation is happening. And it gets pretty high and they get caught in the roots of the tree, which is where I found a lot of them, which is where the flood line area is. So this explains a bit more why that is.
Do you think if the nurdles are becoming entrained in the keep necessarily, and that's kind of where they're new held, which makes a lot of sense, especially versus an open sandy shoreline. Do you think they would have similar attachments, in like the marshy edge of shorelines, and like marsh vegetation out there?
That was something I really wanted to test, but just due to my physical limits at the time, I could not include that in my site criteria. So that would be something I would want to investigate for a future project, because a lot of the shorelines out there are marsh vegetations that do get revealed when low tide really goes around. So it'd be interesting to see how that gets entrapped there and where and how far back. Because when that floodwater rises, it's theorized that they would get pushed really far back. So maybe you should be able to like find them even during high tide or along that edge. That is something that I would like to explore going forward. Anyone else?
You said that the nurdles are able to contain dangerous chemicals and bacteria. Well, so do we have to have the same concern with microplastics, or is that something really simple?
Specifically to nurdles, the bacteria that they harbor. I believe it was, and don't quote me word for word on this, but in my literature review, it suggests that the porous, the prompt, I'm not sure I can't pronounce it right.
That's a good
Velocity of the surface of the nurdle, the plastic itself, can contain or harbor, just in general, catch that bacteria and hold it there and give it a good surface to thrive on, which is where the studies of E. coli and Vibrio species came from. For toxic chemicals in particular, again, no quote me on this, but most plastics, or at least the plastic that I read about during my literature review, can absorb toxic chemicals depending on their makeup and how they were made. So that is not limited to nurdles. Of course, any trash that you find on the shoreline should be handled with gloves because it can contain bacteria and other nasty things to it. Anyone else?
We have an online question from Megan. It says, wonderful talk. Have you seen nurdles aggregate with biofilms and other materials during your surveys?
Biofilms. I wouldn't say so. Again, it might be part of me small because I had gloves on, so I wouldn't be able necessarily to feel it. But visually, I think that would also be hard to say concern because there's something remarkable about what was on the nurdle. It was generally just a smooth surface, very sometimes colorful. But no, I've never really saw any particular absurd amount of biofilm that would be noticeable to the eye. No.
Okay.
Anything else? No.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.